The aisle felt narrower than it should have been, the air heavier with judgment than oxygen. Two security officers gripped my wrists, one on each side, steering me toward the front of the plane. Their hold wasn't rough, but it was final. Like they'd already decided who I was. Conversations broke into murmurs. A few passengers lifted their phones, angling for the best shot. Someone whispered, "What did she do?" Another said, "She looks calm for someone guilty." I kept my eyes forward. Calm wasn't innocence, it was discipline. From the galley came that voice, the same one that started this chain reaction. "There she is. That's her, Rebecca Holloway." White uniform blouse, gold name tag, tone sharp enough to slice through the cabin noise. The kind of voice that didn't ask for proof, it demanded belief. "She's dangerous," she announced, pointing directly at me. I saw her near the cockpit. Gasps followed. One woman clutched her child's shoulder. A man muttered something about safety. It didn't matter that my seat was nowhere near the cockpit. Logic doesn't stand a chance once fear gets a microphone. I didn't fight. My wrists stayed still in their grip, the cuffs biting against skin warmed by humiliation. One step after another, I walked down that aisle, lined with strangers who all thought they were watching justice. None of them realized they were watching an operation collapse. Every instinct screamed to speak, to correct, to explain, to end this. 3 words would have done it. 3 words that would have cleared the aisle and silenced Rebecca's voice. But those same words would have detonated months of preparation and endangered lives far beyond this aircraft. So I walked, silent. Phones followed my movement, recording my face as proof of someone else's fear. To them, I wasn't a passenger. I was a headline. We reached the curtain dividing first class from the rest of the cabin. I caught sight of the man 2 rows ahead, gray suit, dark hair, expression unreadable. The one I'd been watching since boarding. The one who wasn't supposed to notice me at all. He was staring now, eyes cold, mouth lifting just slightly at the corners. He knew. While the officers led me past him, his fingers moved quickly over his phone. 1 text, maybe 2. Whatever he sent, it wasn't good for anyone still trying to stop him. Rebecca thought she'd caught a threat. What she'd actually done was let one slip through the door. Outside, the cabin door opened with a metallic hiss. The tarmac air hit, warm and thick. Engines hummed in the background, and flashes from passenger phones flickered through the windows. Each flash felt like a stamp of guilt. One of the officers muttered something into his radio, code numbers I didn't recognize. The other guided me down the metal steps, the ground vibrating faintly under the idling aircraft. The van waiting below had its doors open, ready to swallow me whole. I glanced back only once. Through the small, oval window, Rebecca stood at the threshold of the plane, her arms folded, face filled with a satisfaction that only ignorance could sustain. She thought this was her victory. She had no idea what she'd just cost. The man I'd been assigned to shadow was gone now, already blending into a crowd that didn't know his name or the crimes tied to it. My silence had bought him time, but it was the only move I had left. Still, there was a part of me that couldn't stop replaying her accusation in my head. She's dangerous. If only she knew how right she was, just not in the way she imagined. As the van door shut, sealing me away from the staring eyes, I took one slow breath and kept my voice buried. Because the only thing more dangerous than being a black woman accused in public was telling them who I really was. Before we continue, take a moment to subscribe, so you never miss stories that expose the truth when it matters most. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We read every one. 6 hours earlier, the sound of a ticking wall clock filled a room that smelled faintly of burnt coffee and tension. No windows, no distractions, just a single folder resting in front of me and 2 agents across the table. The man in charge spoke with the tone of someone who'd said the same words 100 times before, but this time they landed differently. Your target's name is Luca Moretti. Passport under an alias. We believe he's carrying account data linked to a trafficking network operating through domestic hubs. You'll shadow him until touchdown in Dallas. I opened the folder. Inside were grainy surveillance photos, hotel lobbies, private lounges, the edge of a face blurred by motion. Luca's trail was faint, but the Bureau had followed worse. His pattern was always the same, in and out of cities before anyone noticed. The assignment, on paper, was simple. Stay close, stay quiet, stay invisible. The kind of invisibility I'd learned to master long before the Bureau gave it a name. No badge this time. No weapon. Just a discreet transmitter sewn into the lining of my handbag and a phone linked to a secure frequency. Every move I made had to blend into the hum of ordinary travel. My alias, Camille Jackson. Occupation, marketing consultant from Atlanta. Seat 2A, first class. My handler's tone was firm. You're not to engage unless you have confirmation of contact. Observe and record. We'll track the signal from your bag. I nodded, but my mind had already jumped to the details they never put in official briefings, the ones every black woman learns on her own. The stares when you board first class. The second ID check, even when your boarding pass is valid. The lingering pause when someone wonders if you belong where you're standing. That wasn't bureau training. That was survival training. I'd learned to balance politeness with composure because every wrong tone could be interpreted as defiance. Every sigh mistaken for aggression. The Bureau could teach tactical awareness, but it couldn't prepare you for the kind of danger that comes disguised as curiosity. The senior agent across the table tapped the file. We believe Moretti has an inside contact moving through the same airport. He travels light, 1 black duffel, 2 phones. We need his next destination before he disappears again. What's the protocol if my cover's questioned? I asked. He hesitated. You handle it as you always do, quietly. That word stayed with me. Quietly. It was how they expected me to navigate rooms that weren't built to see me. How they expected me to move through suspicion without reacting. The irony was never lost on me. To protect others, I had to make myself invisible. I flipped the file shut. My assignment wasn't just to track a man, it was to do it while every system around me waited for me to make one wrong move. The clock ticked louder as we wrapped up. My flight left in 2 hours. One of the agents handed me a slim envelope with my credentials, boarding pass, and the kind of disposable phone that erased itself after mission completion. As I stood to leave, the handler added, "You'll be fine. You always are." He meant it as reassurance. But fine was a word that covered a lifetime of being questioned, doubted, second-guessed. Fine was the armor you wear when you're expected to endure what others don't even see. Outside the conference room, the corridor lights hummed softly. I took one final look at the folder before slipping it into my carry-on. Luca Moretti's face stared back, a reminder of why I was boarding that flight in the first place. Still, another truth pulsed beneath the mission's surface. One I couldn't say out loud. The operation wasn't the only thing undercover that day. I wasn't just undercover for the Bureau. I was undercover from prejudice itself. The terminal was quiet enough to hear the drag of rolling suitcases and the soft buzz of boarding announcements. I arrived at the gate earlier than required, partly for the mission, partly for peace of mind. Staying calm before a storm was a skill I'd earned the hard way. The line to board first class moved fast. Most passengers were business types, pressed suits, wireless earbuds, eyes glued to phones. Then came my turn. The airline manager at the gate scanned my ticket, her smile polite but uneasy. The name tag read, Rebecca Holloway. Her eyes lifted from the screen to my face, then back down to the ticket again. "First class?" she asked, as if she hadn't already read it twice. "Yes." Her brows drew together. "And what company are you with?" The tone wasn't curious. It was the kind of question asked when someone's trying to find what doesn't belong. I answered evenly, repeating the cover story drilled into memory. Jackson Creative Consulting, Atlanta. Rebecca's gaze lingered on me a moment longer than necessary. Uh-huh. She slid the boarding pass back across the counter. "Enjoy your flight," but as I walked toward the jet bridge, I caught the faint sound of her radio clicking on. "We've got a passenger on 2A, double-checking the manifest," she said under her breath, her voice low but not low enough. I didn't react. Years of experience had taught me that confronting prejudice never ends the way you want it to, especially in places where uniforms grant false authority. The jet bridge air was warmer, heavier. I adjusted the strap of my bag, reminding myself the transmitter inside was live. The mission was what mattered. Luca Moretti was already on board, seat 4C, window side. When I entered the cabin, the scent of leather and citrus cleaner filled the air. Luca sat where expected. Tailored jacket, silver watch, the calm of someone used to control. He glanced at me once, just enough to confirm recognition, though he didn't know who I was. I stored my bag under the seat and took 2A. Everything looked routine. Flight attendants offered champagne and smiles. But from the corner of my eye, I caught movement at the front of the cabin, Rebecca stepping inside. She wasn't supposed to be here. Managers usually handed things off to the crew and left. Yet there she was, clipboard in hand, pretending to check the catering supplies. Her eyes swept the rows casually until they landed on me, her lips tightened. She spoke to the lead flight attendant in a low whisper, nodding slightly toward my seat. The attendant's eyes flicked my way, then back to her. Rebecca's smile returned, but it wasn't friendly this time. It was the kind of smile that said she'd already decided what story she wanted to tell. I looked away, focused on the cabin window instead, the reflection of her pale figure hovering just behind me. The engines began to hum, lights dimming as boarding wrapped up. But even as the door sealed shut, I knew this flight wouldn't stay peaceful for long. Rebecca wasn't leaving. She was watching. Once the seatbelt sign switched off, the plane settled into its steady rhythm. The low hum of the engines, the faint clatter of glasses, and the soft chatter of first-class passengers created an illusion of calm. But peace is fragile when suspicion decides to make a home beside you. Rebecca was back. She'd traded her gate pass for authority she didn't actually have, strolling down the aisle with a clipboard and a false sense of purpose. "Routine compliance check," she said lightly, brushing past the flight attendants. But her attention was fixed nowhere else but me. Every few minutes, her reflection flashed in the glossy panels near my seat, pretending to adjust cabin settings, pretending to count passengers. Always circling back, always hovering. I focused on the mission. Luca Moretti sat 2 rows ahead, phone in hand, eyes sharp. He leaned toward the aisle just long enough for me to glimpse his screen. A message in a foreign language blinked briefly before he deleted it. His jaw tightened. Whatever that message was, it shifted something. He pressed the phone to his chest for a moment, then tucked it away, posture tense. He was waiting for someone or something, possibly a signal, and I couldn't miss it. But it was getting harder to stay locked on him when I could feel Rebecca's judgment crawling up my neck. Her whispers to the flight attendants were soft, but I'd trained my ears to pick up fragments even over engine noise. "She keeps that bag close, never puts it in the overhead," she said. "Maybe she's nervous," one attendant replied. Rebecca's tone sharpened. "Or maybe she's hiding something." I adjusted my posture, pretending not to hear. Years of being in rooms where suspicion was my shadow had taught me how to hold composure until it burned. The bag beneath my seat held the transmitter feeding real-time data to the Bureau's channel. It was the mission's lifeline. Losing it, or exposing it, would end everything. When the aisle finally cleared, I stood, lifting the bag as if to stretch my legs. The flight attendants exchanged glances but said nothing. My walk to the lavatory was casual, but every step carried purpose. Inside, the narrow space smelled of antiseptic and air pressure. I locked the door, pulled the bag onto my lap, and checked the hidden indicator light beneath the lining. Still green. The transmitter was working. I sent a brief confirmation through the secure phone app. Encrypted and silent. 3 minutes in total. But the second I opened the door, she was there. Rebecca stood too close, blocking the aisle with her folded arms and narrowed eyes. "Long time in there, weren't you?" Her voice was laced with that tone I'd heard too many times in too many places, the kind that didn't seek truth, just validation for its bias. "Just stretching my legs," I replied steady. She glanced at the bag in my hand, then at me. "You might want to keep that under the seat, FAA regulations." Her smile was tight, the kind that hides accusation behind civility. I walked past her without a word. She watched me the entire way back, her presence a silent challenge, daring me to react. Back in my seat, I glanced toward Luca again. He was calm now, too calm. His phone rested on the tray table beside a glass of water. Whatever message he'd received had put him at ease. That was never a good sign. Then I noticed movement at the front of the cabin. Rebecca leaned toward the cockpit door, voice low but urgent. The flight attendants froze mid-service, listening. Her words carried just far enough for me to catch them. "Possible hazardous material. Passenger in 2A, requesting cockpit guidance." The air around me thickened. Conversations hushed. A few heads turned, and I knew she'd just turned prejudice into protocol. The captain's voice cut through the cabin speakers, calm but weighted with authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to a passenger safety issue, we'll be making an unscheduled landing. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." The words hit the cabin like a gust of cold wind. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. All at once, every pair of eyes in first class seemed to find me. A man across the aisle whispered, "It's her, right?" Another leaned forward, phone raised just enough to start recording. Rebecca stood near the galley, hand on her hip, radiating misplaced confidence. "That's her," she said to the nearest attendant. "She's hiding something." The accusation didn't need proof. It already had an audience. The plane began to descend faster than usual, the hum of the engines shifting pitch. A flight attendant passed by collecting glasses, hands shaking slightly. Her eyes avoided mine. I sat still, fingers interlaced on my lap. The picture of calm they wouldn't understand. My heart was steady, my mind anything but. Every minute this dragged on, Luca Moretti gained distance. He was still ahead of me in 4C, pretending not to notice the spectacle unraveling behind him. But I noticed him. He was too still. His posture too relaxed for a man surrounded by tension. Then, subtly, his phone lit up beneath the tray table. He typed something, fast, and locked it again. My mission instincts kicked in. He was relaying information, probably alerting his network that the agent trailing him had been compromised. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. Years of undercover work had taught me how to survive chaos without showing cracks. But this wasn't just procedural delay. It was racial bias, dressed up as security protocol. And it was dismantling an entire federal operation, one ignorant assumption at a time. The captain's voice returned. "Cabin crew, prepare for landing." Rebecca walked the aisle again, her expression self-satisfied. She stopped beside me, lowering her voice just enough to sound official. "For everyone's safety, remain seated until instructed. You'll be escorted off first." "Escorted?" I repeated quietly. "You're making a mistake." She straightened, crossing her arms. "We'll see." The landing came rough, wheels striking the tarmac, engines roaring as the brakes bit hard. Within minutes, the plane rolled to a stop on a remote section of the runway. Through the window, flashing lights appeared, airport security vehicles closing in. The captain announced the doors would remain closed until officers boarded. The aisle filled with whispers. Passengers angled their phones, eager for proof of guilt they didn't understand. Then came the shuffle of boots. 2 uniformed officers stepped through the cabin door. Rebecca pointed immediately, her voice ringing with authority she didn't earn. "She's the one I reported, seat 2A. The officers approached. "Ma'am, please stand and place your hands where we can see them." I rose slowly, keeping my movements measured. "You're making a mistake," I said again, calm and clear. Cold metal cuffs clicked around my wrists. Phones flashed. The suspect in 4C didn't move, except for one small thing. As they led me down the aisle, I caught sight of him glancing over his shoulder. A faint smile tugging at his lips. He tapped his phone once more, relaxed. He knew exactly what Rebecca had done for him. She hadn't stopped a threat. She'd cleared his path. The door of the plane opened with a metallic hiss, and heat from the tarmac swept in. The first thing I saw wasn't daylight, it was the crowd. Passengers pressed against the windows, phones raised, recording every step like it was entertainment. To them, I was the headline of a story they didn't understand. The officers led me down the narrow stairs. The cuffs clinked against my wrists. Each sound echoed louder than the engines idling behind us. Cameras from inside the cabin caught it all. The slow, humiliating walk of a black woman escorted by white officers under suspicion that didn't exist. Rebecca followed a few steps behind, her arms crossed, chin high, her expression fixed in self-congratulation. She looked like she'd just saved the world. Every movement screamed authority. Every word she said to the crew made sure people saw her as the hero. She was acting suspicious, she told a bystander, voice sharp and proud. "It's better to be safe than sorry." The officers pushed me toward a waiting airport security van. I kept my eyes forward, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. But inside, a quiet storm brewed, not of fear, but calculation. Every minute wasted here gave Luca Moretti more ground to disappear. Inside the van, one of the officers radioed ahead. "Bringing in possible suspect, female, Mid-30s, carry-on bag in custody, possible suspect. Those two words could ruin lives when spoken by the wrong mouth. The van pulled up to a small airport office near the edge of the runway. A dull gray building, no signage, just a flickering light over the door. They guided me inside to a narrow room with a single metal table and 2 chairs. The air smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. 2 TSA agents entered, one middle-aged man with a clipboard, one younger woman with tired eyes. Behind them trailed Rebecca, still in uniform, as if she belonged there. She didn't wait to be asked. She spent a long time in the lavatory, Rebecca began, voice steady and loud. Her bag smelled chemical. I noticed it the moment she boarded. She seemed nervous, protective of it. I told the crew, but she brushed me off. Then I saw her come out of the bathroom looking agitated. The male TSA agent nodded as he scribbled notes. Any other passengers notice this behavior? Rebecca shook her head. I was the only one paying attention. Of course she was. People like her always think vigilance is a virtue when suspicion points downward, never sideways. The younger TSA agent looked at me. Ma'am, we're gonna need to check your bag. I met her eyes, calm but firm. I don't consent to a search. The room went still. The male agent frowned. You understand refusal only makes this worse, right? I understand my rights, I replied evenly. Rebecca scoffed softly, muttering something about uncooperative behavior. The word echoed off the walls, feeding the unspoken bias that filled the space. The male agent leaned forward. Look, we're not here to accuse you. We just need to make sure everyone's safe. Safe. A word that had lost all meaning somewhere between the gate and this room. My silence deepened their suspicion. I couldn't break cover. Not yet. Declaring who I was would collapse the operation, trigger questions, maybe even expose other agents working the case. But staying silent meant enduring this theater of humiliation. Rebecca's voice cut through again. I told you something was off about her. People like that, you can just tell. The air in the room thickened. The younger agent shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. I sat perfectly still. Calm wasn't surrender, it was survival. My heartbeat slowed to a rhythm I could control. I needed to hold out until someone higher up noticed what this situation had cost. Minutes passed in silence before the TSA agent finally stood. We'll hold you here for further questioning until we verify your identity. Rebecca smiled slightly, satisfied. I didn't respond, because she hadn't just detained me, she'd dismantled an entire federal pursuit out of arrogance and prejudice. As the door closed and their footsteps faded, I allowed one single thought to surface. They thought they'd stopped a threat. They didn't know they'd just set one free. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly for a room filled with accusation. Papers shuffled, pens tapped, and Rebecca's voice filled the air like static, sharp, unrelenting, convinced of its own importance. I told you, she said, leaning forward with her arms crossed. She was guarding that bag like her life depended on it. I smelled something chemical, and she got defensive. That's what triggered my concern. The senior TSA officer across the table, gray hair, calm eyes, decades of experience etched into his face, watched her carefully. He didn't interrupt, but his expression didn't carry the agreement she expected. And you personally witnessed any illegal activity, he asked. Rebecca hesitated. Not illegal, but suspicious. He nodded slowly, jotting a note. Suspicious doesn't mean criminal, Miss Holloway. You understand that? Rebecca's lips tightened. When safety's at risk, I don't wait for paperwork. I act. The officer's gaze shifted to me. I hadn't spoken in nearly 10 minutes. The silence wasn't weakness, it was calculation. Every word I didn't say kept my cover intact a little longer. He finally turned toward me. Ma'am, we just need to clear this up. If you cooperate, we can finish this quickly. Rebecca added under her breath, if she's got nothing to hide. That was the moment the balance tipped. His eyes flicked toward her sharply, as if that one sentence revealed more about motive than evidence ever could. He leaned back, folding his arms. Miss Holloway, step outside for a moment. What? I'm the one who reported her. Outside, he repeated, firmer this time. Rebecca left reluctantly, muttering about ungrateful procedures and bureaucrats who don't understand threats. When the door closed, the room exhaled. The officer sat down again, his tone lower now. Something about this doesn't add up, he said, mostly to himself. Your demeanor doesn't match the profile they described. You haven't resisted, you haven't contradicted yourself, and yet, he glanced at the file. You were reported by an employee who had no reason to be in your cabin. Why would she follow you onto that plane? I met his eyes and spoke for the first time. That's a good question. One I think we can answer if we talk privately. He blinked, surprised. Privately? Yes, without anyone else in the room. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. All right, let's move next door. He led me to a smaller interview room. Bare walls, no cameras, one table. The door closed with a solid click. You wanted to speak privately? He said, cautious now. I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket, slow and deliberate. My movements were measured, not a sudden motion that could be misread, just calm precision. From inside, I pulled a slim black credential case and placed it on the table. When I flipped it open, the gold and blue seal caught the fluorescent light. His face changed instantly. Not confusion, recognition. His eyes widened and he straightened in his chair. You're... Yes, I interrupted gently. Federal Bureau of Investigation, undercover operation in progress. You've detained an active agent in the middle of a federal mission. He froze for a beat, processing the weight of what that meant. Good Lord. The suspect's name is Luca Moretti. He's an international trafficker using domestic routes to transfer encrypted financial data. I was tracking him. The transmitter in my bag is still live. If we move fast, we can locate him before he reaches his next connection. He grabbed his radio, speaking quickly. Control, patch me through to field liaison, priority 1. I slid my phone across the table, screen lit with a pulsing signal indicator. That's the live transmission feed. Your team can trace it now, but before we move, I paused, my tone cooling like steel. I want the name of the woman who just cost us a federal sting. He met my eyes, shame flickering beneath his composure. Rebecca Holloway, he said quietly. I nodded once. Good. Keep it on record. She'll be hearing from my department, personally. Outside, I could hear the shuffle of boots and radios crackling to life. The mission wasn't over yet, but one truth was clear. Rebecca's false accusation hadn't exposed danger. It had exposed her own. The airport corridors hummed with urgency. Within the hour, agents from 2 field offices had mobilized, spreading across terminals like quiet shadows. Radios crackled with updates. Luca Moretti's name was on every channel. The suspect Rebecca's accusation had freed was now the Bureau's top priority. I stood beside the senior TSA officer who'd seen my badge. The shock still hadn't left his face. We've confirmed his boarding. An agent's voice came through his earpiece. He's connecting to Houston. Team Bravo is closing in. I nodded once. Tell them he travels with decoy luggage. He'll switch bags before security. Watch for a black duffel. No tags. He relayed the message immediately, his tone sharper now, urgency overtaking embarrassment. Within minutes, word came back. Contact made, target intercepted. The room went silent. The Bureau had reclaimed the mission. The operation Rebecca's prejudice had nearly destroyed was now back under control. And then came the next call. One I'd been expecting. Miss Holloway has been asked to return to the office for follow-up questioning, an agent informed me quietly. Good, I said. Bring her in. 10 minutes later, the door opened and Rebecca walked in, still in uniform, still clinging to authority that no longer belonged to her. She froze when she saw the room. Gone were the TSA officers and airport staff. In their place stood federal agents, 4 of them, badges gleaming, silent and observant. The air that once carried her confidence now pressed against her chest like weight. Her voice faltered. What's going on, I was told. That this was follow-up, I finished for her. It is. Her eyes darted toward me, disbelief flickering into confusion. You, how are you? I took a step forward, my tone steady. You detained a federal agent on active assignment. You obstructed an ongoing operation and compromised national security because you couldn't imagine a black woman sitting where you thought she didn't belong. Her face drained of color. That's not what this was. Then what was it? I asked softly. Because no one else smelled what you claimed. No one else saw what you saw. Yet you followed me, reported me, and escalated a situation that never existed. She opened her mouth, but no words came. The silence that followed was louder than any defense she could have given. Behind me, a junior agent documented everything. Timestamp, statement, outcome. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. Justice didn't need volume, it needed clarity. Rebecca's shoulders sank as the senior officer explained the formal charges: false report, obstruction, interference with a federal investigation. Each word carved another piece off her pride. She tried again to speak. "I was just trying to keep people safe." I met her gaze, calm but firm. "You were trying to keep your world safe from someone who looked like me." Her mouth quivered. She looked down, hands trembling slightly. It wasn't remorse yet, just realization. The understanding that her actions had exposed more than bias. They'd exposed her own blindness. The agents escorted her out quietly. No spectacle, no shouting. Just the sound of her shoes against the tile fading into the hallway. I turned back to the desk, signing the incident report. My hand didn't shake. The same badge that had been my silent burden hours ago now rested openly on the table, catching the overhead light. As I closed the folder, a thought settled in my chest. Not satisfaction, but something deeper. Justice doesn't shout. It arrives quietly. In the moment arrogance realizes it's been caught. And in that quiet, the world shifts, even if only an inch closer to right. By morning, the story had spread across every major network. Headlines flashed across airport televisions and social feeds. False accusation grounds federal investigation. Airline manager mistakenly detains FBI agent during operation. The footage was everywhere. Me being escorted off the plane, Rebecca standing behind the officers with folded arms, proud of what she'd done. The same video she thought would prove her heroism had turned into evidence of her ignorance. At headquarters, the fallout was immediate. The Bureau's internal affairs had already contacted aviation security, and federal agents swarmed the airport before sunrise. Luca Moretti, the man she helped escape, didn't get far. Intercepted 2 states away during a connecting flight. The transmitter in my bag had done its job, even while I was being humiliated. Rebecca, however, wasn't prepared for her new reality. By noon, she was suspended pending investigation. By evening, she was terminated. Her name trended online beside words like profiling, bias, and discrimination. Her statement to the press about doing her duty only deepened public outrage. The airline issued a public apology the next day. Their spokesperson stood before cameras, polished and rehearsed, expressing regret for the unfortunate misunderstanding. They promised new diversity training and protocols. The words were clean, corporate, and empty. Apologies don't undo humiliation. They don't erase the memory of strangers whispering terrorist under their breath. They don't undo the image of a woman in cuffs, head held high, as the world misreads her silence for guilt. The Bureau cleared me privately, quietly, no press release, no defense statement, just a single line in a closed file. Operation Reclaim, mission success. Success. That word lingered like an echo. The mission had achieved its objective, but it had also exposed something uglier, something no operation manual could train you for. The reality that every time I stepped into a room, I had to prove innocence before competence. Every time I wore authority, I had to shrink it so no one felt threatened by it. Rebecca's downfall made headlines for a week. Mine wouldn't make any. There's no news story for quiet endurance. No trending tag for dignity maintained under fire. Still, justice found its way back, even if it didn't shout when it arrived. The Bureau's internal report confirmed everything. Her interference, the delay, the obstruction, her name would follow that file wherever she went next. In the silence of my office days later, I stared at the official closing memo. There was no satisfaction, no victory rush, just the heavy understanding that people like Rebecca were never one person. They were a system, a habit, a reflex that kept resetting itself in every space where my existence questioned comfort. For her, this was the end of a career. For me, it was another reminder that success, when you look like me, always comes with a receipt. I closed the file, powered off the screen, and let a small, steady breath escape. The operation was complete, the mission recovered, and the truth restored. But deep down, one thought refused to fade. They framed me to feel small. But their own bias wrote my victory report. 1 year later, the Bureau's training auditorium was filled with new recruits. Fresh suits, polished shoes, and faces still untouched by the weight of fieldwork. They leaned forward as I stood before them, not with a slideshow or statistics, but with a story. Today, I began, we're talking about invisible threats, the kind that don't make headlines but derail missions all the same. The room quieted. Behind me, the Bureau's emblem glimmered faintly on the screen. Invisible threats, I continued, aren't always about explosives or cyber attacks. Sometimes they look like a raised eyebrow, a doubted credential, a whisper that starts with, "She doesn't seem like she belongs here." A few recruits exchanged glances, uncomfortable, thoughtful. That was the point. I told them about the day a federal operation almost collapsed, not because of a mistake in strategy, but because someone's prejudice wore the mask of caution. How one woman's certainty in her own judgment had almost freed a trafficker. How silence for me wasn't fear, it was discipline. Bias doesn't always wear a uniform, I said quietly, but it always finds one to hide behind. No one moved. The weight of the lesson sat heavy in the air. I paced slowly across the stage, letting the memory replay without bitterness. When they pulled me off that plane, I knew 3 words could have ended everything. But those same words would have blown months of work, endangered lives, and cost the Bureau its lead. So I stayed silent. I watched judgment parade as duty. I let them believe their story, because the truth needed more time. A young trainee raised his hand. Did they ever apologize? I smiled faintly. Apologies are easy. Accountability is harder. The woman responsible lost her job, but she gained something else. Reflection. I didn't need her apology. I needed her awareness. I paused, scanning the room. Justice doesn't always arrive with sirens. Sometimes it shows up quietly, when arrogance realizes it's been caught. There was a silence that didn't ask to be filled. The kind that comes when people see themselves in the story, even if they don't want to. I looked down at the Bureau seal printed on the podium and thought about how far the truth had to travel to reach that room. Racism didn't just delay a flight that day, I said finally, voice steady but soft. It delayed justice until truth cleared the runway. A few of them nodded slowly, others just sat still, thoughtful. That was enough. The next generation didn't need to remember my name. They needed to remember the lesson. I gathered my notes, but before stepping away from the microphone, I looked up once more. Before I go, I said gently, I want to leave you with something. If you ever find yourself in a room where silence feels safer than truth, remember, silence might protect your comfort, but it never protects your conscience. The recruits clapped, not the loud kind of applause that follows a speech, but the steady kind that follows truth. And as I walked out of that auditorium, I knew one thing for certain. The mission had changed me, but it had also changed them. If you were in my position, would you have revealed your identity sooner? Have you ever watched arrogance turn into regret in real life? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe to Echoes of Hope Stories HQ, because silence should never be the end of any story.